All right, and we're live. Good evening, Facebook family. This is Antoine up in Canada. We have Jeremy. Where you at, Jeremy?
I am in New England.
New England. And we got Dave, the roaming nomad. Where you at, Dave?
What's going on, viewers? I'm in Baton Rouge right now on vacation with the family.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. And we're all passported up here, right?
Oh
Say
yeah.
it again.
Everybody has their passports.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's what's up. Let me pose this first question so we can introduce the topic, man. If you can go back to Africa, if somebody said go back to Africa, and they weren't saying it as a pejorative, but they're saying go back to Africa to find your roots or whatever else, where would you go, Jeremy?
I think the first place that I would like to go is, well, I don't know, because we've been looking into this topic that we're about to get into, and they're talking about Ghana a lot. I never really considered Ghana as like that would be like my first place to visit. I would go to Ethiopia because for me that's like where it all began. You know, even before Egypt. So I would go to Ethiopia.
Right on, right on. How about you, Dave? Dave, we still got you. He probably look for that mute button. So while he's finding the mute button, I'll go ahead and I'll say I would like to go to Ethiopia, Kenya, and Rwanda and knock all those out in one trip. Um, I went to Ghana, but it was a long time ago. So I would like to revisit Ghana also because it's a success story on the west coast of Africa, and more than likely we're going to have a lot more genetic connection to Ghana than we will Ethiopia, but not necessarily true. But uh, culturally, we know where we came from in Africa. So, Dave, we got you back yet?
Yeah, my bad, man. The wife gave me a call and it knocked me off. I know there
Awesome.
has to be some way I can go in the settings and change that.
No, if it's important, right? She'll find a way
Nah.
to she'll find a way to drop the call, believe me. But so the question we posed was if you can go anywhere in Africa, if somebody said go back to Africa, where would you go?
Yeah, I would probably go to Nigeria first, just because I did the whole um, DNA testing, and um, I'm majority Nigerian. I think it was like 31% was the
Right on.
breakdown for me. And I know these aren't horribly accurate. I mean, I'm sorry. I know that there's a margin of error potentially, but yeah, I would probably go there. And then after that, Cameroon, because I'm like 29% Cameroonian,
Yeah.
um, specifically the Bamaliki tribe of Cameroon. So uh, I would probably go to those two destinations.
Yeah, right on. Dave jumping off into the deep end of the pool. He said Nigeria. That's supposed to be the most chaotic. Not, I don't know how much turmoil they have going on there, but I just know it's definitely the most populated and most like New York type atmosphere as far as dog eat dog environment. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually was speaking with a Nigerian not too long ago, and
Mm.
she was just telling me about kind of the tribal warfare and the internal conflict and everything. And it's yeah, that's definitely sad. But she said that she's very optimistic about the prospects of kind of the country coming together and healing. So
Yeah. So let me ask this to you guys: how excited are you about this announcement that the Ghanaian president made? What's his name? Nana Kodu Adu. I don't want to jack it up. I think it's Nana Kofi Adu, Kodu. I don't know. I'm not. Nana Akufo Addo is his name. President Addo. I mean, speech was pretty spirited. and it sounded like he was just cutting through all the mess, and opening the doors up specifically to Africans in America.
Yeah, I kind of feel phlegmatic about it. I think the idea of it is great, but I'm curious to know the logistics of it. The idea of us building that partnership, potentially going back to the motherland, sounds absolutely great. But when you think about Africa, it's huge. It consists of like 54 countries, and in each of the countries they have so many states, and like I don't know how our reception would be. I know Ghana. It seems like they're all on board with us going back to Africa. So I'm assuming that it would be a warm reception there. But so there's that, and then from an economic standpoint, like I don't know where our place would be there, and there's just so many details about it that I'm not clear on. So the idea of it to me sounds fantastic, but when you start breaking it down and looking at that idea under a magnifying glass, it kind of, I don't know, I don't know how to feel about that. I would need to know more information because when you're talking about moving a group of people from America to a land that they've never, most of us have.
I think we lost him for a second. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Yeah, it looks like it went to mute. I agree. For me personally, I am excited about that. But I also know a lot of people, like a lot of what we've seen about Africa through all the different media platforms and stuff. We haven't seen I guess a positive enough message about Africa that I think would compel a significant amount of people to actually want to make that journey to even to visit. Like I would like to visit, but I'm a person that likes to travel. Not a lot of people are even they feel like they know enough about the continent as a whole to even want to get on a plane and go visit. So when you're asking someone if they want to go live there, I think in order to do that, I know I was listening to Akon. He had a little press conference. It was a gathering that he was at recently, and he made a few really good points. He was talking about just like how Africa is portrayed as a whole, and it's just people are thinking it's just you go outside and it's just like elephants and zebras and stuff running around, and there's no infrastructure, there's no there's nothing to do. And while I believe that couldn't be, I mean, yes, you have your wildlife, but you've also got you've got technology, you've got infrastructure, you've got a lot of development in general. But I don't think a lot of people are really aware of that, and it hasn't been seen as a place, like an ideal place that people would want to go and live in, just because that knowledge hasn't transcended to the media platforms that a lot of Americans subscribe to. So while I'm excited about that, and then as David mentioned, there are a lot of gray areas that haven't been mentioned, like because his speech, the segment of the speech, it was like really direct, straight to the point. It only lasted a few minutes, and it sounded great. Like they're trying to help people get their visas, and I'm all for that. They're trying to work with ways of getting people employment. He didn't really go into any detail about in terms of employment doing what. But that would require some additional research to find all of that out. But I do like the fact, and I'm excited about the fact that he's opening the doors where we're being welcomed.
Yeah.
But as far as like how many people are actually going to make that move, I think we need to get some, maybe even get some groups together that are willing to travel travel in packs, so to speak, and just go and visit, do some visitations, take pictures, record video, and I think get people more excited about making that journey. 'Cause I think it can be a really powerful thing, but I think we have to get more of, more Americans interested in that and even aware of that, because a lot of people may not even know that this is even a thing, so I think that there's a lot that needs to come in order for this, because they're talking about, doing this massive rollout, this huge migration, welcome home next year. And we're almost into it's October, we're almost in the next year now. So I think there's a lot that needs to be learned. A lot of people need to just get the passports, get ready, and just go out there and visit first, and just see what's out there, and then we could start making our minds up about moving somewhere, because you got to get your family, you got to, it's a lot that's involved with just like uprooting your current existence and migrating elsewhere across an entire ocean. So it sounds amazing, but I think we've got some things to consider.
But it's definitely not for everybody, right? So I think the call went out to African Americans as a whole, or Africans in the diaspora as a whole, particularly those in the Americas. Because we got to remember, we have all the Black folks in the Caribbean, all Black folks in Colombia and Venezuela and Brazil. So you're talking about millions and millions of people.
Oh, yeah.
But of course, that message is only going to resonate with a small community. And they already have a community of African Americans in Ghana. I think they have one of the larger communities of African Americans in the whole continent. And I think they understand what they're asking. But I don't know if African Americans have really given it much thought ever. I think we're more comfortable thinking of Africa as this idea. But I think for a lot of people, when it actually comes to fruition, if somebody, like the movie Black Panther, everybody got really excited about that idea. Okay, now somebody opens the door and said, come on, let's do it. And now we're seeing people, I think we'll see what happens. I'm not going to say people are hesitating, because it hasn't happened yet. But some people it's for, some people it's not. But what do you have to bring back with you? It's like, if you go to Africa, are you going to be more of a problem there, or more of a burden? Or are you going to come there and contribute? So that's the biggest thing for me. Is I think if Dave, if you went, or Jeremy, if you guys went, you guys would go there and you would have something to offer. So I don't think employment would be that big of a deal. But if somebody who didn't have the skill sets or the human capital that you guys have, if they decide to go back to Africa, what do they bring? Or do they find themselves there? Because now you're going to be dealing with a government that possibly doesn't have the same amount of resources. Well, not possibly. We know for a fact it doesn't have the same amount of monetary resources as the United States. But you'll get to see a different style of life. I think like one of the worst things that happened to African Americans was when we came out of the South into the cities, and we were like stacked on top of each other, put so close together, lost our agrarian background that we had in the South and everything else, lost that team spirit that we had in the South also. So it'd be a calling back to that, because now you can go back to Africa and maybe you can live off the land. Maybe you can have a more rural type life in Africa. But it's just it'll be a complete shift and change in the way that you're living your life. And then at that point, who do you complain to? I think a lot of people are comfortable in America because, to an extent, they're comfortable complaining.
I guess for me, there has to be a strategy in place. There has to be a stratagem. So let's take Ghana for example. If Ghana said, hey, here's the socio-political system that we're currently under, or that we plan to have. Here is the economic strategy that we're looking at. So we want to be able to have jobs available for you all. We have these precious resources. And these are the jobs that we have to kind of capitalize on the resources that we have to engender or manufacture certain products. You know, um, here's the moral compass of our country. Here's some of the things we want to do with neighboring countries. You know, and here's the relationships we want to build with them. If they lay out a plan and that plan makes sense, then I think that would make more African Americans feel comfortable about the idea of making a move such as the one that they're speaking of. But I think there has to be a solid plan in place. But again, I like the idea of the African diaspora rekindling or rebuilding a relationship with the motherland. I think that is crucial. That's important. Even if we do stay in the Americas or we stay wherever we're positioned, just having that relationship with Africa, and hopefully, obviously, we want a mutual relationship where both parties are being benefited. I think that would go an extremely long way. I think that would be positive for both parties.
So one thing that always kind of just bewildered me, I never understood it until recently, is the fact that if you go back to Europe, or if you're flying, let's say from Washington D.C. or from Chicago, and you fly into Europe, I mean, you can go to London for maybe $400 or $500. I mean, for a good portion of the year, it costs you very little money. You get a round trip ticket to London and back. Now, if you just up and decide you want to go to an African destination, you're going to end up paying 3 or 4 times that amount of money, easy. So yeah, you have that barrier where a lot of people don't have their passports because they don't travel. So that's one. That's easy. You go to the post office, you put in for your passport, it comes back in 6 weeks. And then you have this visa situation saying, okay, if you want to go into an African country, because they're not looking at African Americans as a subset, they're looking at America. So if you're coming from America, you need a visa. But now they want to do some type of visa system where we can go into multiple countries or whatever else. That's great. That's another barrier down. But then there's still that third barrier of the cost of travel, because even if you wanted to move somewhere, I don't know anybody who will up and move somewhere and they don't visit it 2 or 3 times. So now your cost, even for yourself, is going to jump from, I don't know, $1,200 or $1,600 to $3,200 because you're going to go there at least one time before you move there, right? And if you have a family, now you're talking about multiple people. It becomes very expensive. So if you could just, we could figure out a way to lower the price. Now, there's more stories in the news right now about Ethiopian Airlines and them being pretty much the top of the hill of airlines in Africa, and trying to make those trips between the Americas and Africa cheaper, right? I think if you're talking about making the world smaller, making the relationship between Africans and the Americas and Africans on the continent closer, we have to figure out how do we get a lower cost of travel so we can lower that barrier for people, because it's great that we can go, but how about Johnny up the street? You know, he might need it more than anybody else. He might need to rekindle that relationship with the motherland. So yeah, point made. What do you guys think about that? Hold up, Jeremy, you're on mute.
All right, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I was saying I just ran a search on Skyscanner from anywhere in the United States. You know, you just put in as a whole, like you just want to fly from the United States. And I just put in a couple different destinations in Africa. Like you could plug in like Ethiopia, and like the lowest ticket price that I saw is over $1,000. I checked Ghana earlier today. Lowest ticket price is over $900. And those are for like, you have to get like prearranged dates that you could, you know, once you find the date you want to go, you go ahead and book it. But like you said, it's expensive. I also checked, you could go fly to like, you know, Manila, for example, for like $200-$300, you know, from the United States. So it's like you want to travel anywhere else for the most part. And this is like much cheaper than if you want to fly to Africa. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I need to do some more research and figure out why that is. It might be because of the volume of people they have that want to go to Africa, but you would think there's a pretty large African diaspora, with Nigerians, Ghanaians, Ethiopians in America. You would think they're going back and forth, so you would think that the price should be lower. But it can also be due to people have like different taxes and you come into any plane that lands in the country or whatever else. So that might be something that they might want to relook, because whatever benefit they get from the tax of that plane landing in their country cannot be as impactful as a plane full of 200 or 300 African Americans that are going to come there and spend the money and stay in the hotels and everything else. And that's the other thing, making it the year of the African Americans. I'm telling you right now. So I've been to Ghana once before. The people they're brilliant. The people are brilliant. They're very warm, very open. But like I said, I haven't been there since 2012. I would like to see has the infrastructure improved. It wasn't horrible in 2012, and it wasn't on like first world status then either. But since then, things are moving. For every year that moves here is like 2 or 3 years of advancement there. So I would think that it's gotten better. It wasn't to a point where it wasn't recognizable as like a city or anything like that. I went to Accra and I went to Kumasi. It was just there was a gap there, as far as when you get back to the States and there's no potholes, or seemingly no potholes comparatively, because not all of the roads that were paved, right? But that's just so manage expectations, I think, is huge also. I think the best thing that most African Americans can do if they have an interest in going to Africa, any country in Africa, is just get on YouTube and look at videos about that country. And you're going to find any particular country, I guarantee you, it's a few hundred videos out there about it. And look at the recent videos and then keep up with the news. So what did you guys think about Dr. Mumbi? What do you think about her videos?
You know what? I like the content that she brings. I have been recently aware to kind of like just keep an eye out for her message to see if anything shifts, because of something that she has worn on at least one previous occasion. So I haven't really I'll be paying attention to that to see if I see anything. I don't know if I want to mention it on here. Maybe I could talk about that offline, but I don't know. So she does have some good video content, though. I will give her that. I watched a few of her videos. I saw the one where she was talking about Melania going into Africa and holding all the, holding and kissing on the babies and stuff, and like so she does talk about some interesting topics, and but yeah, I don't know. I haven't fully formulated an opinion as of yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I thought she had some interesting theories. I'm not 100% sure of the validity of some of them. Like, for instance, she talked about the formation of a new world order, and she was speaking on some secret societies, and I just don't know about that. But the idea, though, of African Americans reaching back, or not reaching back, but helping the motherland in any form of fashion, I think is a great idea. So she did touch on that. She touched on like African Americans bringing the skills that we've learned from being under the regime that we're under, and using those skills to benefit the motherland. I think that would be great too. And even us bringing the money that we do have, the wealth that we do have, to invest in the motherland, to invest in the infrastructure of the motherland, I think is a positive as well. So she had touched on those ideas, or those things too. So, but as far, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, but as far as some of the other, I don't want to call them conspiracies, but some of the other things she was touching on, I just don't know. Like I know she had talked about Trump being the best thing for the world or being the best thing for Africa and for
Mm.
Black folks because he's fighting against the formation of this possible new world order through um, perpetuating nationalism here in the United States, and that's the best for us because the last thing we would want is to be under like one world government. And she went off kind of, she said some far-fetched things like this one world government would potentially develop artificial intelligence that would help to keep all the different unions that would form in check, um, and like just all of that. I just wasn't. I don't know how I feel
She took
about
you a
that.
little bit too deep.
Yeah, yeah. She was.
Don't discount the power of AI.
That's
AI is very powerful.
that's a very. I know it all sounds very strange to people, but and
Oh yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not
I definitely.
endorsing or underwriting anything that she said. All I'm saying is, um, I think she's a beautiful sister because of her love for the people. And like, if you listen to any of these previous videos and you think that, I don't love black people, you're sadly mistaken. I'm just the type of person I love everybody. I think if you love yourself really, really hard, then it makes it really easy. It makes it easy for you to love other people. And so I don't have anything negative to say about white people. I don't have anything negative to say about Chinese people, and because I just love on black people so hard, man. I think if we can get into the motherland, and I just imagine myself there, man, with a big, big house next to a big mountain, a big river, you know, and
Yeah,
just
and honestly, I would prefer for us, the African diaspora, to invest in the motherland as opposed to China. To
yeah,
be completely honest, for us to pour our resources into it, because I know our intentions would be pure, and our intent or motive would be for the motherland to prosper. And
yeah.
I'm not, and so I guess I do somewhat question China's intention. They've been pouring billions of dollars into Africa for what? Is it because that they're industrialized now and they're not getting the same GDP growth that they were, and now they're looking for a um, a place that isn't industrialized that they can capitalize on the precious resources.
Well,
Uh,
to that extent, I think it's mutually beneficial, though, don't you, Dave? To the point where their economy has pretty much hit a point where it can't grow anymore for a few different reasons, right?
right.
Because of the one-child policy and then now having to be take care of their children and their parents because they don't have the social security that they didn't plan to have the social security that they needed, right? But then also the fact that now they have such a large middle class, they've kind of outgrown, uh, you know, the point where they can find cheap labor inside of China, so they're going outside of China, and
Right.
I think that's okay. That piece
Well,
is
see,
okay. I think the
the
issue
reason,
comes when you start talking about extracting, the extraction of resources from Africa. I think if we can take that knowledge, because that's human capital that we're gaining from China. We always say, okay, if you're going to come in here, don't build it for us, build it with us, or show us how to do this. I'm
see,
saying we, but this is the Africans, of course.
see, here's my issue though. China is sending their companies and corporations over there, and I mean, and I guess we're talking about the idea of this, but they're sending the idea of them sending their companies and their corporations to Africa, and then um, ascertaining cheap labor via Africans and benefiting from a capital standpoint from all the production of goods and the selling of goods and things of that nature. To me, I feel like that's them taking advantage of Africa. Now, if it's African companies and corporations that are the ones that's manufacturing the goods, then that's a different story. But the way that things are kind of materializing, it sounds like it's more than likely going to be the former.
Okay,
when I
so
think about how they're going about building the infrastructure within Africa, like, yeah, to me, it's almost like, honestly, I think it's neo colonization or neo colonialism, and I think they're doing it to benefit themselves. But there is the potential for if the different countries in Africa take advantage of the loans and the money that China is pouring into the country, there is an opportunity for them to, kind of benefit from all this. I'm just afraid that I just don't think that China's intentions are pure, like the intentions of the African diaspora would be.
yeah, so I mean, I don't know what their intentions are. I try not to, ascribe to them what I think their intentions are. More so, we have to look at it from a point of how can we benefit from this, even if they're being benefited in some type of way. Because where there's a gap and somebody comes in to fill that gap, that's your only real concern. So there's a contract. Anytime somebody hires somebody else to do a job, that's a contract, and that person is willing to work for that amount of money. They're willing to work for that amount of money because it puts them in a better position than if they weren't working, right? So even if they paid them pennies on the dollar, what they would pay somebody in China or what a person in America would pay, it's a great deal better than that person not working at all. It's not just the money piece either. A part of it also is going to be if you're not working. We all think about ourselves through what we do as men. We're saying, okay, I am Antoine and I am blah blah blah. And Jeremy, you would say the same thing, and Dave, you think the same thing. Now, if somebody comes there and they say, okay, we're going to put you in this factory and you're gonna sew clothes together. That gives that person a sense of meaning and belonging and kinship with other people who do the same thing, along with a paycheck and a way to take care of their family, and the infrastructure is getting built. Now, imagine.
But don't you want them to be the ones that actually are the producers and not just the workers, right? Because even when I think about us African Americans here in the United States, we're primarily workers. We're not the owners, and that doesn't put us in the best of positions, especially considering it is Africa. It's their land.
Yeah.
And the only point that I was trying to make, when bringing China into the discussion is that I believe that it would be the best scenario would be us, the African diaspora, filling that gap that you're talking about.
You're absolutely right there, but it's like a girl with 3 different suitors now, or really 2 different suitors, because they have the Chinese, and they have the Europeans that are both Europeans and Americans that are both competing to get a piece of Africa because the economy is doing so well, because you have this really young population that needs work. And I mean, you really can't, like, if I like a girl and you like a girl, the only thing we can do is try to sweet talk that girl better than the next person. But at the end of the day, she might be giving a piece to everybody. We don't know, and my only concern is really, am I in there or not, right? That's the chief concern is, are you getting a piece of the pie? And you don't need the whole pie. You can get a piece of it. I know, I'm sorry, you got your family with you, Dave.
But then is that analogy? No, that's an interesting analogy, because if you both like a girl and is she giving it to one or the other or both? But here's the thing: is Africa giving this piece, or are they taking these pieces from Africa? Because like Dr. Mumbi did mention something about the Chinese, like every morning at like 2:00 a.m. they're having these electrical surges, and then they look into it, and they're sending tons of data across multiple companies to Beijing. And then, as you know, we just had the report come out on the 4th of this month that the same thing was happening with us, where we're constantly, being pretty much hacked. Like there were 30 U.S. companies, including like Apple and Amazon, getting hacked and infiltrated by these little tiny microchips and sending information back to Beijing. So it's like, is Africa giving, or are these other places taking? Are they taking? So I think that's something to consider too when you talk about Chinese, like a mutual. beneficial relationship.
They're clever, man. So yeah, if that's true news, well, that's really neat because I mean they build everything. So you know what item do you have in your house? You don't look at the bottom of it and it says made in China. So if all the iPhones that we buy are made in China, and you know the African Union building in Ethiopia was made in China, like what do you expect? Now all they have to do is put a, what do you call those things? Trojan horse, whatever else, any of those devices or any of those buildings, and they can take whatever they want to because they built it. And 9 out of 10 times, it's translating the data back to Chinese. So you can never prove it unless you can speak Chinese.
Yeah,
but
I guess I just would like to see Africa become producers, to become true competitors in this global society. And I think that the African diaspora pouring resources into Africa and investing into Africa will help in that effort. I just question the motives of China and some other countries who are in Africa right now.
All right, so anything can be produced, right? So let's just say it's like tiles or roofing tiles or something like that, right? How many African Americans have roofing tile companies is the question. And then are willing to move. How many African Americans have the mind state? Now, you run into an African American who does have that. I would say maybe 10 or 15% of African Americans, if the doors were opened up to Africa and they can just miracle your ass into Africa, I think maybe 10 to 15% will go.
I think that's a big number. That's a big estimate. That's maybe less.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like
it's unfortunate, but I believe it wouldn't be. I don't think we would see 10%. I think realistically, maybe 4 or 5%, maybe.
Yeah, it's just too much uncertainty. It would take a lot of time, a lot of relationship building. It would be a process.
Yeah, I think that number would increase over time. But yeah, like David said, it would definitely be a process. It wouldn't, like, if you could just magic your way into Africa. I think, you know, I think that'll be like a generational shift more than anything, just because it's 400 years later.
So do either one of you know anybody who lives in Africa now, any African Americans that made the move back to Africa?
Not African Americans. I do know some African people that spend some time living out here and then they go back home through another portion of the year. Like I know some people like that, but those are actually like African, you know, they're residents of Africa. They were born in Africa, raised in Africa, and they just came here for work. But as far as African Americans, I don't personally know any that have gone and moved out there.
You guys know anybody? How about you, Dave?
Nah, I don't know any. No, I don't.
How about African Americans that recently visited Africa in the last 4 or 5 years?
I've talked to some. I don't know any.
How about you, Dave?
Yeah, I can't think of any off top.
Would it help if we maybe had a podcast with somebody who was in Africa, an African American?
I think so.
Okay. I'm going to look for somebody, man. I don't know anybody in there right now, but I know there's a couple of different organizations that are there, and I know they're willing to talk. But I think there's the people who do it, they're really pioneers, but they've had it on their heart for so long, for so many years, you know. And I remember, Adam, you don't remember this. I remember being 7 or 8 years old in front of grandma's house. I had on a dashiki and I had on a one little goofy ass hats like this, and I had the African medallion with 3 different colors, right? And I think I was talking to Isaac or James or one of those guys, man. And I said, "Oh man, you know, we're African. We just did the what's that that religion, not religion, but that holiday around Christmas,
You know about Kwanzaa?
Kwanzaa. Oh man, I've never seen kids laugh so hard, man. They thought I was just the biggest joke ever. You know, it's like who trained them to laugh like that so early? Because we were all just.
Wasn't Kwanzaa created in the United States?
It was. It was created in California somewhere, man, by this.
It was crazy.
But I mean, he was talking to some African immigrants or something like that, and he figured out some of the tenets of their religion and was like, you know what, I'm gonna make a holiday, and it went viral. Well, we would call it viral today, but you know, it was a good idea, I think, to some extent, because I think there's something inherent. The same way, you know, hey, we always say Black people are great dancers, great great athletes. But the one thing that did strike me when I remember being there. Now this is 2011, you know, so this is 7 or 8 years ago. This trip, but I just remember the people would break out and dance anywhere, man. It's like I was in Kumasi. And on every other corner, man, it would be like these troops of people doing these dances, and people would stop and they would watch. And we're all married, you know. Adam, you're not married, so you could still go there and probably find a wife or something like that. But I remember just the most beautiful women, man. Like, and the idea of beauty was kind of turned on his ear because there were so many beautiful dark-skinned women there that wore their natural hair, you know. And, I guess the idea that we have of beauty hasn't really shifted. I think pretty is pretty at the end of the day, and I think you can recognize anybody recognizes somebody who's beautiful when they see it. But I've never seen so many beautiful women since. You know, even in Dominican Republic or whatever else. Even though I like Dominican Republic more because it's closer, and I blend really nice there. But I think Ghana had some of the most. Anywhere else in the world, they'd be beauty queens, and there they were just, you know, walking around with a baby tied to their back and a bucket of fruit on their head. But I think there's something inherent about it, even in the language. When I hear the people talk or whatever else, it sounds very. I think if we spoke that language, I think we have a lot better orders. You know, I think our bastardized form of English is embarrassing in the boardroom sometimes, but I can see, you know, that language, like for a white person that speaks the King's English and grew up speaking the King's English in the house, it's a very easy transition when they go to work and everybody talks like them. And this is not an excuse because we live here and we have a responsibility to also speak the King's English, the best of our abilities. But I do wonder about these things. If we were talking in our own language, would it be easier to transmit ideas, abstract ideas to each other if we spoke African or if we spoke an African language?
That's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
I think that's worth looking into. Like, I really do.
Yeah. So those are the type of things that kind of just they resonate with me when you get there and you see the people and you just say, this is, you know, I don't have to look any different than the way I look. I even look at the news that I watch. It's CGTN. I watch this incessantly every day, and they have these news anchors there. They're ladies, and they're pretty ladies too. It just they have these weaves or these wigs on their head that obviously is not the hair that's coming out their head. And I said, man, they would be so pretty because the women who I saw there wore their natural hair. Like they had, you know, their hair was short. Maybe it was afro. Maybe it was twisted, Bantu knots, braided. But I said, wow, that really goes well with your face. Not that a weave doesn't work on a Black woman's face. I mean, they can make it work. but maybe the Bantu knots, or maybe that works better there. And could you imagine being in a place where everybody looks like you everywhere?
Yeah, it's interesting that you're talking about this because my mother, she visited South Africa and she had the same experience. She said she felt right at home. She couldn't like she was just amazed by the beauty of not only the country but of the people. She saw so many individuals who looked just like her. It gave her a greater appreciation and love for self. Like it had that same type of inflection or impact on her as as it sounds like it's had on you. And I look forward to visiting Africa because that's something that I want to experience as well. And I do think that if African Americans, if more of us got to visit Africa, that would help with the identity crisis that I believe we have um, here in the States today.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's like a really like a deeply rooted longing for that connection to Africa that I would say the majority of us have here in the States and all across the rest of the diaspora. I really believe that there is that longing, but I think there's also a really large disconnect where it's just a complete, and I believe it to be an intentional um, lack of knowledge, and as a result, the lack of interest and a lack of motivation to really make that journey. But I really believe that if the word could be spread, if people could become enlightened, if people could just hear a story just like the one that you've had and the one that she's had, and and people can hear that, and I really believe that that would resonate with people, because just to even sit here as somebody that has personally never been to Africa, I've been to other continents, um, but I've never had that feeling like what you're describing right now, because none of those places that I've been was Africa, so I've never experienced that, and that just, to me, the what you just described sounds like a dream. Like it really sounds amazing, and it's like I want to experience that. Like I really do, and I will. If I'm able to, um, I want to do this. I would say next year is so maybe we could schedule like a group trip or something, and just have
Oh, definitely.
people go out there. But I want that experience. Like I really, and it's not just because of the women that you were talking about were out there, but just that whole that I want that culture shock.
Yeah.
That culture shock of people that look like me. When I go somewhere, and I feel completely welcome, and that I don't have to try to force myself to assimilate to be a diminished version of me to fully enjoy that environment.
Yeah.
'Cause I feel like a lot of like African Americans, and I know like pretty much anyone that you talk to you know that's really like ventured outside of their immediate surroundings will tell you that they kind of feel like they have to be a form of a chameleon, as they navigate through society. Because, like you said, people that are born speaking the King's English, and they look like the people they go to work with, and they don't have to make any alterations to try to accommodate other people, and that's something that we're pretty much in a state that we grow up feeling like that's what we have to do. Because if you notice, if you go home and talk to your family, you don't really talk to your family in the same dialect that you would go and speak to someone on the job, because a lot of it might get lost in translation. So that's why when you're telling me about, you raised that question about, you know, our thoughts and being able to communicate being based off of a language that might be more, um, what's the word I'm looking for?
Better suited
More,
for it. Well,
yeah, more suitable, yeah, for who you are. You know, how would that how would that be translated? What would happen as a result of that? And that's something that I definitely do want to explore for sure.
yeah. And to manage expectations, like everything wasn't perfect. And remember, this again is, I keep saying this is 2011, and things have changed since then. It probably improved to some extent. Everything wasn't perfect, but never did I not feel like people didn't truly love me, which is strange because when they come to America, America has its own way of doing things. Like, not only do we not like lay the red carpet out for anybody because we're America, we're big bad America, but at the same time, we kind of poke fun at people also. Which is okay. So this is the thing. This is what was strange to me being in Africa as a light-skinned black person, right? And I don't think it really cared. They cared too much about my skin complexion, right? Because there's other light-skinned people there, but you do stand out. So because of my skin complexion, I stood out a little bit. And they would say, they call, what's the word? It's been such a long time, but it was a word for white people. And basically, they found out I was American. They could kind of look at me and just see, Adam, they might have to look at you a little bit longer, or they might have to see how you walk. When they see how you walk, but when you open your mouth and you talk, you realize that you're not from there, right? And then you're going to be that same word, which basically means foreigner, but it also means white person. So this whole time they kept calling me this word, but I never felt like it wasn't in a way. It was never like in a pejorative way. It was always like it just rolled off the tongue because that's what I was. I was from somewhere else. So I felt, and everybody, the women would come to me and they say, "You're so beautiful," right? They said, "Oh, you're so beautiful." I said, "Oh, this is going to be easy." But, but okay. Anyway, you feel like a rock star being an American in Africa. You feel like a rock star. People will welcome you into their homes. And then the children, for whatever reason, were like super well behaved. I remember going into somebody's house and the house wasn't that big, but the kids were all really, really good. Like they were all lined up on the couch, sitting down, like, I was some type of special person or something like that. And we ate. And when you eat, everybody eats. We were eating with our hands. I don't know if everybody does this, but we ate with our hands, and we ate, as a community. Like everybody would sit around, and you reach your hand in, and you put it on your plate, and you eat. And I met a couple grandmothers while I was there. Like the old people were like super warm, super welcoming, and they had me climb up a tree to pull some fruit off the tree. I'm just having I'm remembering more and more about this trip now because it was a very memorable trip. I remember walking through this area, and it was outside of the city. And the guy who was taking me around. So if you go there, you need to have a person that's going to show you around, right? That helps a lot. You don't want to just be there wandering around by yourself. And they may want some money for that, or maybe they won't. It just depends on the situation. More than likely, they're going to want some type of money, some type of payment. But we were walking on this road, and there weren't any animals around or anything like that, but it was a country road. And he just reached up in the tree and brought this fruit down and cracked it open, and it was a coffee fruit. And I never had coffee fruit. And that stuck with me. Like the fruits that you can just reach up in a tree and grab. The cities that were built, like Kumasi was more beautiful than Accra because Kumasi is the seat of the Ashanti Kingdom. So they pay more prudence to the tribal kingdom than they really did the national government. Kumasi, it wasn't as big as Accra, but it was more beautiful, like better put together. I mean, I would say, yeah, you got to go. I have to go back. And I'm not just trying to go to Accra. I think you were talking about Ethiopia earlier. I would really like to go to Ethiopia, Rwanda, and Kenya, and make that all one trip. I want to fly from Canada to Ethiopia on Ethiopian Airlines. Right? I don't care how much. I want to do it on an African airline, man. You know, so we can go Africa all the way, you know, because it's possible. And I think for people who really want it, because I think you have a lot of fake people too. You have like some Afrocentric people that have no interest in Africa, really. They think of Africa as a thing and not as a viable place to actually be, you know. A lot of people who would just complain about the current state here. Why is it a pejorative if somebody tells you to go back to Africa? Now, maybe they mean it as a pejorative, but that should never be a put down to us. You know, not if there's someplace to go.
Yeah, and I think it's extremely sad that generations of Black Americans did not have the opportunity to go back to the motherland, to go back to Africa and to experience it. And I do believe we need to put an end to that, put a stop to that. And us as Black Americans, we need to go over there. We need to have that experience. We need to make sure that our children are having that experience. We need to spread the word. We need to encourage others to do the same. And yeah, I think there's a great importance in that.
For sure, man. I think that's something we all have. And Dave, I know we talked about it before. We talked about putting a trip together.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. We definitely need to make that come into fruition, man. I'm all on board. Actually, we ended up doing a membership with this resort company, AM Resorts, and we have RCI exchange days, and it's international. So we have like really good deals in Europe and also in Africa. So at some point, we all do need to just come together, sit down, and plan a trip.
Okay, yeah, we'll do that. I don't know, Jeremy, you have any last thoughts on this subject, man?
I just think that, you know, like what was said before, I just think we need to, you know, just spread the word, you know, make more people aware of Africa and you know, in a different sense than what we've been brought up to believe about Africa, because the same entities that taught us what we know as Americans about Africa are the same entities that taught us how to misbehave as children and got us to the point to where if you enter a house somewhere else and you see children behaving, it's just like, you know, it's part of that culture shock, because you know, out here television tells us that we should talk back to our parents, that we should disrespect our parents, we should put our parents in old folks homes once they get to, you know, at a certain age range. Like this is what our adopted society has pressed upon us, and you know, generations and generations of that. You know, now we have, you know, you go to a school and pretty much every kid in the school is on some kind of a medication, you know, because to help them behave, you know, because there's that disconnect from how people should be as children, how they should be receptive, and they should, you know, learn from their elders, and you know, they should be respectful. You know, but that doesn't translate here in the U.S. because, like you said, we've got a different way of doing things out here, and you know, that same force is the force that's behind us feeling the way that we feel about Africa as a whole, as you know, African Americans. And you're right, it absolutely does need to change. So I'm all for it.
Absolutely, and it feels really like I felt really. I had this warm sensation when I was listening to the video of the Ghanaian president saying that he, you know, that their country has opened their arms to us, that they want us to come and visit, that they want us to to be a part of what they're doing. That definitely gave me a sense of it just felt good to know that we're wanted by Africa, because I think there's this huge misconception out there that we're kind of like the bastard kids and we're not wanted. So to hear this from from the Ghanaian president was a great feeling, and I think it probably will end up spreading through Africa. I don't know if it was Dr. Mambi or I forgot which video I was listening to, but someone made the statement that typically when something starts in one country in Africa, it generally spreads to other countries in Africa. So can you just imagine if other countries in Africa kind of start similar projects to try and get to encourage the African diaspora to come back home? I mean, that would be awesome. But yeah.
Yeah. I think another point to be made too is just, you get your pension or something like that. Let's say your pension is $20,000 or $30,000. In Africa, you're gonna live like a damn king. At the end of the day, I think we can't do that. We were just talking about, okay, possibly put your parents back in an old folks home or something like that. Well, they'll have that, But if you want to avoid the old folks home for yourself, think about this now. I only have one son, and I don't even want him to have to take care of me when I turn 70 or 80 years old if I'm infirmed. I want the medical system in Africa to be good enough or safe enough for me to say, okay, you know what? I'll live over there and have a maid or whatever else, because somebody's getting employed and you're getting yourself taken care of. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but if there's you don't need that much money to make that move. That's one thing that I grabbed from a lot of the videos that I've watched on the people who've made the move before us. You could probably find a nice apartment for $200-300 a month, probably less, depending on what level of apartment you're looking for. But you can find a Western style apartment for a few $100s a month. That's insane. The cost of living is lower. Another point is just that, we have to motivate other people to start at least thinking about it as an idea, because for the longest time, it hasn't even been a consideration because of the news that we watch. So what if we start watching African news? Because I believe in the power of intention, meaning that if you think about something hard enough for yourself, it happens in your life, right? I think that's the only reason I'm where I'm at right now, is because I believed it. I didn't fear. I think that prayer almost works in a way when you don't actually have to get on your knees. I'm not talking religion. I'm just saying I feel like that prayer is a conversation between you and God, out loud or in your mind or however else. And that's the universe that is going to respond and give you what you want. Now, if we had every African American, at least in that state of mind, if we had every African American not saying, okay, I'm going to move to Africa, but at least thinking about Africa as a possibility because it's a real thing, it's a viable option, the economies are real. You don't think that would shift the universe for Africa to do better?
It would, but you do have to, like you said, you have to get people on that same wavelength where they're actually thinking about it. Because right now we're too consumer based. We're too focused on what celebrities doing, who's in a relationship with whom. Like we're too focused on the wrong stuff right now, and so it's not even so much just like the news that we subscribe to. It's the news. It's the the sports shows, it's the sitcoms, it's a lot. There are so many distractions that are intentionally keeping our minds off of something such as this, that we would first have to overcome that before we could, before getting across to people so that they can get to that same mental state where this is becoming a consideration and something that people are looking to want to do. But you've got to get around all the distractions first, and I think that's going to be the biggest challenge.
Yeah,
that's true. That's very true.
Okay. Hey, I think I want to thank you both, man. I think this was a very worthwhile conversation. I don't think there was any controversy in this conversation. I think it was all information. It was all good information. And I think what's going to come out of it, one, I want to have somebody on here that's actually African American and on the continent or living in the continent. And, I'd also like to make sure that we go ahead and schedule our trip. Um, Dave, it's funny because we talked about Cameroon before, uh, but it's a little bit unsteady right there right now. I think that East African trip, we need to do it, man. Like Ethiopia, Rwanda, and Kenya.
Oh yeah.
You know, with the wives, whatever. We just go ahead and make that trip and touch down, grab some of that beautiful black dirt.
Yeah, I'm definitely on board. Yeah, you sounded a little bit like Ye. So
Hey, so
reach
yeah,
down
that's
and
the
grab
other
that
thing.
beautiful. What you say?
His album he delayed it, but you know why he delayed it, right?
Yeah, he wants to go back to the motherland and be in that environment and produce some more music.
That's gonna be a
But at the
hot
time,
album. I'm telling you, he's gonna come back
I think so
inspired.
too. Yeah.
He's gonna come back inspired, man. He said he's gonna release it on Black Friday.
Yeah,
That's
I
not.
think that. I thought that was a very creative and I like that decision that he made to go back to the motherland and kind of to draw from its environment, and I think it's going to have a huge impact on the music that he generates from it. Yes.
Shout out to the brother Akon too. Akon is always his song. He has a song called Africa. So much. Senegal, can you hear me? He talks about, he has his one verse. He said, they don't know what they're missing. He was talking, yeah, he was like, they don't know what they're missing. Every day I water my garden, something. But he just says, hey, I'm singing from my heart because you African and Eric kind of has a very interesting story too, because his father was already living in America. He had Akon while he was in America and then moved him back to Senegal. So that way he was an American citizen, wouldn't have any trouble going back and forth. But Akon grew up in between Senegal and St. Louis. And I think he moved out at some point. He moved out to Jersey. He had a very interesting story. The brother, like 46, 47 years old, and he had his loan. The loan he got to get those lights came from China. And if that's the thing, also, I'll let you guys go here in a moment. But I've been to China, right? And China's not a rich country, man. It's not. It's better off than people would think because it has a middle class that's living to our standard that's larger than the United States. But it also has 1.3 billion people. So it has another billion people. And it's developing and it's not easy there. And they're not, it's not nobody's getting over on anybody. And there's a certain synergy. I think I can see knowing a lot of Chinese people. I know that they're very clever. And knowing a lot of Asian people, I know that they're very clever people, but they're also very good-hearted people. A lot of them, man. I haven't met any really bad ones. It's like the guys who I work with. Like I have 3 people here who I was hanging out with when I first got here, and I didn't plan this, but they just all happen to be Chinese. And I think I don't know if they have the same burden of the racism. So like when I was dealing with them, it was more so trying to figure out who they were as per people because I didn't have a lot of Chinese friends growing up, right? So just trying to figure out how they were as people, but there's no like burden of thinking about past wrongs done or anything like that, or this person is white and this person's looking at me like this or that or another. So
See, I think the people are probably genuinely good, and I'm sure they have like certain morals that they stand by and certain standards that they hold on to. But it's the actual government, the Chinese government, that I kind of question a little bit. And I guess that's why I have my concern when it comes to their involvement in Africa.
And you're right to be. Everybody is right to be concerned. I think. I think the right to be concerned is important. I think this. The other thing is don't miss the opportunity, because if we're waiting on African Americans to go back and fix it, man, we would have fixed it. We should have fixed it as soon as slavery was over. I mean, we had people going back to Africa right after slavery or right before slavery, right, with Liberia and everything like that. Yeah. That worked out to some extent, and to other extents, it didn't work at all. Right? If you know the history of Liberia. Okay, hey, let's go ahead. That's a conversation for another day. I'm going to stop this broadcast. You guys hold the line for just a moment, all right?